Please welcome to the stage Sue Bird, WNBA legend and co-founder of Together and a Touch More, and Kara Hurst, Chief Sustainability Officer of Amazon, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Carol Masser.
Yes, this is a rock star panel. I'm just going to put it out there. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, I have to say, these two are pretty incredible, and they have unique connections. I just want to do a little quick setup. Kara spearheaded the Climate Pledge, which was co-founded by Amazon back in 2019. Group of more than 500 companies, I think it was 503 to be exact, per your website, 45 countries around the globe. They've made a commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040. Amazon purchased the naming rights into what is today the Climate Pledge Arena. That was back in 2020. Sue is a member of the ownership group of the WNBA team, of course, the Seattle Storm. The Storm was the first WNBA team to actually sign the Climate Pledge, and the second North American professional sports team to do so. So pretty cool. The Storm plays home games, of course, in the Climate Pledge Arena. And Sue, by the way, won her 5th Olympic gold medal in Tokyo in 2020. So I'm just kind of tying it all together. Another connection that these two have is really phenomenal platforms. And that's where I kind of want to start, because when you have a platform, you kind of have a responsibility to use it. So, Kara, I want to start with you. For you guys at Amazon, it is largely about a lot of things, but for you, sustainability and the climate. How do you think about the value of having Amazon, worldwide known, huge firm, huge company, massive platform? How do you think about the responsibility of that platform, and how do you prioritize the things you want to do?
Sure. Well, I couldn't be more excited to be on this stage and this conversation today. So thanks for having me. It's a huge responsibility and also a really exciting one, because one of the things we get to do at Amazon is to use our scale and really the speed also that we go at to send really big demand signals for clean technologies like what was just being discussed. To say that we want an accelerated fight towards climate change. And what you just mentioned, that we set our intention to be net zero carbon by 2040, that's 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. And we set that looking at the science and saying, we think we're in this decisive decade. We know we need to move faster. We have a lot of optimism about doing that, but we can't go alone. And we're excited that over 500 organizations and other companies have joined us in that. But we want to send these really strong demand signals, and we want to also put our own resources towards that. So we've been doing things like purchasing renewable energy. We're the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world. We have been for the last 4 years. We announced yesterday we've actually hit 100% renewable energy across our global operations, which is a huge feat. We have over 500 projects.
Yeah, exactly.
Around the world. We've got 24,000 electric delivery vehicles on the road already. We've got one of the world's largest electric charging infrastructure kind of operations going. We've just got, we look at all the different aspects of our operations and think about how do we make it more sustainable on behalf of our customer. We want to reduce waste. We took out those plastic air pillows. We took out 95% of those in North America. So we want to make a sustainable company and do it on behalf of our customer.
Sue, I want to bring you into it. You are part of a group of very elite athletes. And when we use the word legendary, it doesn't apply to everybody, but it definitely applies to you. So kudos. The platform, though, has been a couple of decades in the making and then some. How do you think about your platform and the responsibility of how you use it?
Yeah, women's sports is at an interesting moment, especially women's basketball. And for
a good interesting, right?
Yeah, no, great interesting, great interesting. But what's interesting about it, maybe in a negative sense, is while the coverage has increased, what I've noticed is it's not always accurate. And it's really had me take a step back and be like, first of all, what else is inaccurate out there being told to us, by trusted, places, other trusted platforms. So I think for me, when it comes to my platform, for so long while I was playing, it was about, bringing a certain understanding to the game, right? Using my platform for all kinds of good. Now I'm like, wait a minute. I got to make sure the stories that are being told are accurate. I got to make sure that when people are tuning into a game, they have a full understanding. So that's really where I feel like I can use my platform now as a retired player.
It's also the way women athletes have been portrayed. Like, I was reading some things about the Olympics coming up and the Olympic Committee, how they've been changing some of the standards and updating in terms of how they want media representation of women. And it's not just how they look or kind of superficial stuff, but really just what they are achieving. That's important.
So important, so important. I think what's beautiful about women, especially women's athletes, is we are dynamic. We've had to be. For so long, we weren't getting the coverage that we deserve. We weren't getting the credibility. So we had to have different parts of us. So I think it is great to highlight those things. But to your point, not just about appearance, not just about these artificial things. So I love that the Olympic Committee is doing that.
I want to talk a little bit about the climate pledge. So I'm curious, Kara, when you have conversations with companies, what is it? Is it tough to get them to sign on? Or tell us kind of the environment here.
Yeah, I think it's a huge commitment to sign on, and it certainly takes resources. And so I think it takes a leap of faith, too. Not all of us know how we're going to get there. There are some things we know how to do, like electrifying fleet, and then there are other things like aviation, where we know sustainable aviation fuel is part of it, but we don't know all of the solves. And so some of it is a bit of jumping into the fray and saying, we know some of how we're going to get there, and also we need to partner to figure out some of the other ways which we don't necessarily know. And we need to change the game, right? So we need to figure out how we're going to come together and make new decisions together, put resources together, and also public-private partnerships are a big part of it. So how do we come together and work in the cities where we all have employees or we have operations and get cities to change their infrastructure, and build differently the buildings that we're in, or put more rail in, or change our, the ways in which people commute, and those kind of things as well.
Well, Sue, was it like a no-brainer for the Storm to sign the climate pledge?
I was playing then, so I wasn't in those rooms. But
that's true.
Yes, but knowing our franchise, knowing the ownership group, I'm sure it was a no-brainer. They're very much an ownership group that wants to help the world change. I mean, it's a big statement, but at the same time, when you find the ways that you can have that impact, it's really not that big of a statement. You can really change the world.
I always think about, we all set out on a course, whether we go to school or we start working and we think we're going to go this way and then we start going a different way. And I'm curious about, Sue, what motivates you and how maybe that has evolved over the years to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky, I say this from the start, to be an athlete. When you think back to childhood, when I think back to my childhood, I was just a kid that really liked playing. I just loved playing sports, and how lucky am I that led to an actual career where I graduate college and immediately I have a job, a profession waiting for me. So I was super lucky in that sense. But throughout my career, motivations change, right? Yeah. There's the motivation early of maybe wanting to prove yourself in a field, right? You haven't, in my world, I haven't won the championship yet. I haven't won awards yet. So I have this grit about me that I want to prove it. But then that flips when you have done it, and now you have to prove that it wasn't a fluke. And now you have to sustain, and now you have to stay, for lack of a better, on top of that mountain, which has a whole other type of challenge. And for me, as I kept doing that, then it became, okay, I've won the things. Now how can I actually have an impact on this? So it's really interesting how through the course of my career, I've had these different moments, these different types of mountains, and trying to figure out how to stay motivated. And again, I'm lucky. I play a team sport. A lot of my motivation came within the locker room, within my team. I had teammates to look to, whether they were pushing me or I was pushing them seeing me succeed, me seeing them succeed. And that's really a big motivating factor for me.
What about for you, Kara, in terms of your job? And I think about your career, too. You've been in Silicon Valley, different worlds in terms of sustainability. How do you think about, what motivates you in terms of your choices and then wanting to be part of Amazon and their mission?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I've worked in NGOs, I've worked in government, I've worked in now corporate America. And I think, being on those teams and thinking about the different languages you have to be able to speak, I'm impact oriented. So what I really have been motivated by is trying to figure out a way. I've always wanted to make a difference, wanted to make an impact on the world. I've worked on human rights issues, I've worked on environmental issues, and I want to figure out how do I use the resources and the scale of whatever I'm working on to kind of make that change. And in NGOs, you have influence in a different way. Government, you have scale, you have policy changes you can make. In corporate America, you have resources, and you have a different kind of scale. And you have to kind of speak the language of the different team that you're on and the different kind of context you're in, but you have to remain authentic to yourself and lead in the way that's going to make the folks around you understand the impact that you're trying to make and the context that you're in.
How do you guys think about the next generation in particular? And Sue, let me go over to you. I think about you really kind of changed the game, no pun intended, in terms of the attention that you've brought to certainly women's sports, women's basketball, on the college level, and then, of course, on the professional level. You made a difference. It's huge. And I think young women need to see that. So how do you think about that?
I mean, I've always taken great pride in that. I think what's amazing about this younger generation, and I can kind of tell the story within a story, if you will. When I got towards the end of my career and we were doing things like CBA negotiations, it was really the younger players. So by the way, at this point I was 37 and I was considered old. I'm still
that's so
figuring
unfair.
that out. I'm wait a minute, am I old? Am I young? But we had, the younger players at that point in the WNBA were 21 to let's say 25, right? This age range. And for me, I had grown up in a era where we were fighting, but also just happy to have a league in a sense.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to use this term, but we're all very familiar with the shut up and dribble, cringe. But that's really how it was a little bit. We were happy to have a league. We didn't want to push too hard because, we don't want this taken away from us. And now, like I said, I'm in my late 30s, these players in their early 20s, so this younger generation you're alluding to, they were like, no. We need charters. We need charter flights. What are we talking about? No. This locker room, not good enough. And they really, it wasn't an entitlement as much as it was, this is what we deserve.
Right.
This is what's right. And I think the combination of the two generations, if you will, in our last CBA negotiation is really what got us to a really promising place, and it really set us up for the future.
Kara, for you, and I know we've talked about sustainability is something that a younger generation looks about. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and she's turning things over, looking at ingredients. Where was this made? What's the carbon footprint?
Sure.
They matter, and they care.
They do.
So how do you think about what you guys need to do at Amazon in terms of the next generation?
Yeah, I think increasingly this next generation, they both care a lot, they're incredibly passionate, and they have a lot of anxiety about what's coming and what the state of the world is. And so one of the things I think is our responsibility is, one, to act fast, to drive big solutions, but also to bring some optimism to it. We have time. We don't have a lot of time. We're in this decisive decade where we have to act now.
Right.
We have to move very quickly. And so I think one of the things that we need to lead on is to show that there are solutions, but we need to deploy them now. We cannot wait any longer. So one of the things leaders need to do is to take those decisive actions. We need to make changes now, and we need to make them at scale.
So I want to ask you, can you stand up for a second and show your T-shirt?
Stand up?
Yeah.
All right.
Look at this T-shirt. This is
Sarah's T-shirt.
Yes. Sue's T-shirt. I'm doing this because, Kara, I want you to ask a question of Sue. I mean, these are incredible leaders. I can throw you in a bar and I can imagine the conversation. What do you want to ask Sue?
We've already had some really great conversations about lots of things, New York and favorite shows and stuff like this. But one of the things is I was thinking about is you have so many different passions and interests, and we were talking about some of the things you could work on, and I'm sure you get approached all the time with ideas that people have for you, given your platform and your reach and how passionate you are about things. So how do you go about making decisions about what you want to spend your time on and how you use your platform and how with all the things you could inspire the next generation to do? How do you make decisions about where you want to spend your time?
Yeah, great question. Still working on it. I'm only retired, soon to be close to 2 years. which still feels really fresh. And the best part about being an athlete was that was it. That was the North Star. That was the priority, and what you could fit in around that, you would try, but that was always the guiding light. And that got, I don't have that anymore. So in a wonderful way, I shouldn't complain. I have a ton of options, but like anybody who has that problem, there's a bandwidth situation. You got to worry about your own mental health in that way. So it's been tricky, but I think what I learned when I started working with brands as an athlete was you want to be aligned with your values. So I think that's really become like the guiding light. You want the values to be aligned with no matter who you're working with, whether it's a brand, a company, the people you're going to go into partnership in business. You want to make sure that aligns. And I found that when that's there, when that's the baseline and the foundation, then you can start to maybe carve out things you're passionate about. Then you can start to carve out things maybe that you think are going to have a larger impact. But as long as that foundation is there, then you can make your decisions based, on all the other things you might be interested in. And then, of course, the bandwidth part is really, that's what I think I took on a little bit too much, to be honest, and now I'm whittling back.
Sometimes you have to say no.
Yeah. Saying no, the power of no. Yeah.
Turning the table. Sue, a question for Kara?
Yeah. So something that I know that I've encountered, being a woman, is at times I've walked into rooms and I've just kind of assumed that maybe I wasn't the smartest or I didn't have enough experience, enough knowledge. And I can only imagine in the corporate world what that must be like as a woman walking into these different rooms. And I'm wondering if there is either advice you want to share for up-and-coming women in this way, or maybe a moment where you were like, oh no, like what I have to bring to this room is just, if not more important than everybody else.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. So I think it's taken a while. But one of the things I think is really important in order to be able to lead is to really just figure out who you are first and really own that. And I think over the years, just really understanding what you have to offer and the authenticity of your own experiences and just feeling that and owning it. And I think once you really live that in your own body, actually, knowing and owning that experience, all that value that you've had, all that leadership that you have on the court, how valuable that is in any context. And it doesn't matter you haven't had business experience or you haven't had experience in XY situation. The leadership that you've been able to bring, in an Olympic setting, 0.00001% of the world's population has been able to, lead under that kind of a pressure. And so I think whatever that translates for any of you, to take a moment back, take a breath and be like, I got this. I can lead in that kind of a situation, and then just feel that, take a breath, and own it. I think that we all need to just kind of remember sometimes who we are.
All right, just got 50 seconds, so this can be really quick. We started talking about platforms and using your platforms. Sue, advice to everybody out there. Everybody has a platform. Yeah. What's your advice? What do you hope people walk away from?
Yeah, I think at times the word platform can be almost intimidating because you think you have to have, I said it kind of earlier, I touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
Like, to say you want to change the world is such a big statement. It can be intimidating. Like, do I have a platform? How big is my platform? How am I ever going to do that? But the reality is, if it's just one person, that's going to ignite change. So I feel like at times you have to really zoom out from that intimidation factor and realize whether it's in your own home, your family, your community, whatever ways in which you can impact, even if it's just one person, it's huge. Sorry.
One person makes a difference. I love it. All right, Kara, real quick.
I would just say, remain optimistic, because I think, the beauty in being optimistic